Unmute.
What are you looking at the YouTube? Today is the 15th day of November in the year 2023. The Frisco Municipal Court is now in session with the Honorable Judge Stephen O'Connor presiding. Kyle, can you hear me? Kyle, where'd you go? Kyle. Daylight comes in, you want to year 2023. The Frisco Municipal Court is now in session with the Honorable Judge Stephen O'Connor presiding.
Didn't pick it up perfectly. Yeah.
That wasn't like screaming.
No, that was just your normal voice.
This is for show.
It's every time it's like putting a puzzle together with a different picture.
This is, I mean, when we started with Zoom, when we were at home for COVID, and I had to run a court session from my house. Every time we went on,
Something different.
it would update, I mean, it was terrible.
We need ourselves.
Please rise. Today is the 15th day of November in the year 2023. The Frisco Municipal Court is now in session with the Honorable Judge Stephen O'Connor presiding.
Thank you, folks. You could be seated. And Janice, can I grab that file from you? Thank you. Very much. All right, the first case that the court will call will be case 2023-3482, Town of Frisco versus Margarito Javier Herrera. Would you step up, sir? And before we get started, I'm going to swear you in, if I could, as the interpreter, sir, if you go ahead and raise your right hand. You swear or affirm that you will translate faithfully from the English language to the Spanish language and from the Spanish language to the English language to the best of your ability.
Yes, sir.
And if I can have you state your name for the record.
My name is Adolfo Vasquez.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez. I appreciate it. Mr. Herrera, I understand today that you are here for a charge for failure to obey a traffic device and no proof of insurance.
Usted aquí está el día de hoy para ver la situación que usted no obedeció un signo para pararse y también de la situación que no tenía aseguranza, ¿correcto?
Correct. Do you understand those charges, sir?
¿Sí comprende lo que le están cobrando ahorita? Okay. Yes.
I have been handed paperwork by the prosecutor that indicates to me you are hoping to continue the matter and set it for a later date. Is that correct?
Y ahorita este muchacho en nuestro lado izquierdo le dio papeles al juez a que queremos continuar esta situación a que usted en el futuro puede enseñar que tenía aseguranza, ¿correcto?
Correct.
When we have you return, sir, you will be asked at that point to try and get this case resolved. Does that make sense?
Y cuando usted regresa, vamos a arreglar la situación, si usted tiene la evidencia o no, ¿seguro?
No problem. No problem. The next court date that we have, Janice, I think is January 17th, same time in the same building. Does January 17th work for you?
La próxima vez que vamos a regresar a la corte que sigue va a ser el 17 de enero, mismo tiempo. ¿Está bien con usted, señor? Yeah, he is okay with that, but he's okay with that. Could we just give him something, just piece of paper
Yep.
saying that?
We absolutely will. Yes, sir. I'm going to accept your request for a continuance on this case. We will see you January the 17th, and you can get some paperwork from the clerk.
So, él nomás por ahorita está poniendo en la computadora que sí vamos a seguir este plazo. Y estas señoras, nuestra mano izquierda, nos van a dar todo el papeleo a que usted sabe que van a regresar ese día específicamente.
Any questions for me right now, sir?
Unas cuestiones para usted. ¿Usted tiene unas cuestiones para él? Si tiene usted unas cuestiones. Obviamente que no. Usted va a ver. For right now, no.
Okay, you can see the clerk. She'll get you a little bit of paperwork. We'll see you in January.
Vamos a verlas y ya vemos cómo se. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and last but not least. Thank you.
Next case the court will call will be the Town of Frisco versus Danielle Twite, and I apologize if I've pronounced it incorrectly. Case number 5666. And ma'am, thank you for stepping up to the podium there. How do you pronounce your last name so I can make sure I'm getting it correctly?
Twite, sorry.
All right, excellent. That rarely happens, so I'm glad to hear it. Mr. White, I have in front of me several forms that I will go over with you. First and foremost, I have the advisement of legal rights form. Do you recall getting this form when you arrived here today? There's a signature at the bottom right-hand corner of this document. Is that your signature? And were you able to review that document before you signed it? Did you have any questions about that document before you signed it? Okay. I have in front of me here that there is an original charge that you were cited for speeding 10 to 19 miles an hour over the limit, and some paperwork from the town prosecutor that is indicating to me that we are dismissing the original charge of speeding 10 to 19 miles an hour over the limit and pleading you guilty to a defective vehicle charge. Is that your understanding of what we're doing here today? Okay, before we go ahead and do that, I do have a few questions that I'd like to ask you just to make sure that your plea is knowingly and voluntarily made. So bear with me while we get through that, and then we'll get you out of here, okay? First question, which I have to ask, is a little bit silly since we're speaking in the language and the form is in the language, but do you read, write, and understand the English language?
Yes.
Okay. Do you understand the nature the nature of the charge and the elements of the offense with which you have been charged, meaning the speeding 10 to 19 miles an hour over the limit?
Yes.
Okay. Do you understand that if you were to enter a plea of not guilty, it would be up to the town prosecutor at a trial to prove you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt if you decided to move forward to a trial?
Yes.
Okay. Do you understand that by virtue of entering into a stipulation for entry of a guilty plea, that you are giving up that right to a trial to have the town prove your guilt beyond a reasonable doubt?
Yes.
All right. Do you understand the nature and the effects of this plea, primarily being that there would be 2 points assessed against your privilege to drive here in the state of Colorado, and that I will sentence you to a fine, which I'll get to in a moment. But do you understand that those would be the consequences of your plea? All right. Did anyone promise you anything outside of what is indicated on the four corners of the form that I'll go over with you in a moment, or otherwise coerce you into signing this form? Are you doing this of your own free volition, entering into the guilty plea?
Yes.
Do you understand that if you were to ask the town to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, you would have the right to go to a trial should you so choose?
Yes.
And do you understand that the maximum penalties that could be assessed for the original charge of speeding 10 to 19 miles an hour over could be up to a fine of $1,000 and or 1 year in jail? I will tell you, we're not going to be anywhere near those thresholds today, but do you understand those are the maximums that could be assessed against you?
Yes.
All right. And do you acknowledge that there's a factual basis for the plea, which basically means there is an underlying circumstance that supports us being here today to get this resolved for you?
Yes.
All right. I have in front of me the motion in order to dismiss and or amend your original charge from the speeding 10 to 19 to that charge of defective vehicle. At the bottom right-hand corner of this form, there is likewise a signature. Are you able to see that?
Yeah.
Is that your signature? Were you able to review this form with the prosecutor and talk to them about any questions that you may have had before you signed it?
Yes.
All right. To the amended charge of defective vehicle, which again is a 2-point offense against your privilege to drive, amending the original charge of speeding 10 to 19 miles an hour over the limit, how do you plead to the charge of defective vehicle?
Guilty.
All right. Court will accept your plea of guilty to the amended charge of defective vehicle, a 2-point offense. Court will approve the town's motion to dismiss the original charge of speeding 10 to 19 miles an hour over the limit. I will go ahead and sentence you to a $70 fine, in addition to $30 worth of court costs, and Janice, there's the $25 surcharge as well. All right, so you've got the the $70 worth of fines, plus the $30 worth of court costs, plus the $25 surcharge. My math is correct, and you never know, should be $125. Is that right? Are you able to pay the $125 today, or do you need a little bit of time to get that done? Okay, super. So if you'll give me one quick moment, I'm going to go ahead and just fill out this paperwork for us here. We'll hand it to the clerk, and then you can see them to get that taken care of for you relative to your payment. Janice, this way or that way? To you. Wonderful. Good. Step right on over there. We'll get your payment taken care of. Thank you very much. Yeah. Next case the court will call will be citation number 07635, Town of Frisco versus Clayton Stevens. Mr. Stevens, are you here? Step on up there if you would, please. How are you doing this evening, sir? I am doing quite fine. Thank you for asking. Mr. Stevens, I have a number of the same questions to ask you that I just went over, so you'll bear with me. I appreciate your patience. First things first, I have in front of me an advisement of legal rights form. At the bottom right-hand corner of that form is a signature. Do you recognize that signature? Is that your signature? Prior to signing this form, were you able to read this form? And before you had any questions about it, or before you were uncertain of it, were you able to get those taken care of before you signed it? Okay. I have in front of me here, sir, the similar paperwork to like what I just gone over a moment ago, motion in order to dismiss and or amend in a stipulation for entry of a plea of guilty. That paperwork indicates to me that the town is asking to dismiss the original charge of speeding 10 to 19 miles an hour over the limit and have you plead guilty to a charge of defective vehicle, which is a 2-point offense against your privilege to drive. Is that your understanding of what we're doing here today? All right. So before I launch into the form in particular and the sentence specifically, a few quick questions to ask you. Again, I realize it's a bit of a silly question, but do you read, write, and understand the English language? All right. Do you understand the nature and the elements of the offense with which you were originally charged, that being the speeding 10 to 19 miles an hour over the speed limit? All right. Do you understand that if you elected to plead not guilty, that the people would have to prove you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt on each and every element of the offense at a trial? And do you understand that by entering into this plea, you are giving up your right to a trial and also waiving your right to have the people prove you guilty on those those elements beyond a reasonable doubt? All right. Do you understand the nature and effects of entering into this plea, that being primarily that you will have 2 points assessed against your privilege to drive, charge of defective vehicle will enter on your driving record, and I will sentence you to a fine to include court costs and surcharges if the court accepts this plea? Okay. Was this plea knowingly and voluntarily made? What I mean by that is you're not in the influence of any substances. No one forced you to sign this. No one made you any promises beyond what's contained on the 4 corners of this form. Is that correct? All right. And do you understand the possible penalties you could be facing here? Though again, same representation for you. We're nowhere near those thresholds, but it could be up to $1,000 and or a year in jail. You understand that? Okay. And do you acknowledge that there is a factual basis for the plea, meaning there is some underlying circumstance that leads us to this point today that could otherwise sustain you entering this plea of guilty? All right. Same question for you relative to the actual plea of guilty. Bottom right-hand corner, I see a signature. Do you see that from where you're standing? Is that your signature? Were you able to review this form before you signed it? All right. To the amended charge of defective vehicle, again, a 2-point offense against your privilege to drive, how do you wish to plead? Court finds that the plea is knowingly and intelligently made. I will accept your plea of guilty. I will sentence you to $70 worth of a fine plus $30 court costs and a $25 surcharge for a grand total of $125. Are you able to pay that today, sir? All right, super. So I will take this paperwork over here to the clerk, and you can see the clerk will get you all squared away. I can get it.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's for the continuance. Do you want that one back or back, please?
She can keep everything less. Thank you.
Yes. That's for the continuance. Okay.
Your Honor, I just have a couple of cases that I want to discuss on the record.
Had that at council. That's just fine. Thank you.
First, pursuant to Colorado Municipal Court Rule 248A, prosecution would like to dismiss ticket number 07633. Parking privilege for handicap defendant is Wadsworth Joseph. And
Sorry, go ahead, council.
And we were also scheduled for a bench trial today for defendant Woodruff Andrea, speeding 10 to 19 over MTC 1101, ticket 5656. The town would also like to enter a dismissal for that bench trial.
Quick elevator pitch, 10 seconds. For the reason for dismissal.
There is a recording of the incident that the town believes would very well sustain a finding of reasonable doubt.
On the first or the second case?
On the speeding ticket for Mrs. Woodruff and for Mr. Wadsworth, the handicap parking. Defendant was able to show proof of an active handicap tag for the vehicle.
All right, as to the Wadsworth matter, the court will go ahead and approve people's motion to dismiss. As to the Woodruff matter, the court will go ahead and approve the people's motion to dismiss. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All the business we have, Your Honor.
That's it. All right. There being no further business before the court, we will round it out. We'll stand in recess until January the 17th. Wonderful. Look forward to seeing everybody then. Thank you. We'll go off the record.